Secretary Catherine. Mr. Brian has approved your resignation, but he didn't notice that it was you who was leaving. Do you want me to remind him? Upon hearing the news on the phone, Catherine slowly lowered her eyes. No, just leave it like this. But you've been Mr. Brian's secretary for 4 years. He's most satisfied with you and can't do without you the most. Are you really not going to think about your resignation again? The HR person was earnestly trying to persuade her, but Catherine just smiled. No one in this world can't live without someone else. My parents are not in good health, and I'm busy going back to my hometown to have a blind date and get married. Since Mr. Brian has approved the application, I'll hand over my work according to the process. I'll leave in a month. Thank you for your trouble. After hanging up the phone, Catherine continued to sort out her belongings. She had lived in this villa for 3 years. She didn't have too many or too few things, except for some necessary items. She threw the rest away. Looking at the gradually empty room, she was in a trance for a moment, and countless memories welled up. 8 years ago, after Catherine, a small-town girl from an ordinary family, was admitted to H University, she became best friends with Dorothy, the eldest daughter of a wealthy family in City B. The two girls with vastly different family backgrounds got along extremely well. They went to class, had meals, and went shopping together every day, always sticking together. Gradually, Catherine was introduced into Dorothy's circle, got to know her family, and fell in love with her brother, Brian. However, she buried this feeling in her heart and didn't tell anyone. After graduation, Dorothy went abroad to study. Catherine stayed in City B and submitted her resume, becoming Brian's secretary just so that she could see him often, until one day, an accident happened. Brian was drugged. Just as Catherine was about to call the hospital, she was pressed against the wall by him who was out of control, and a flood of kisses rained down on her. After a night of intimacy, when she woke up, she saw him sitting by the window. His well-defined face was hidden in the curling smoke. Looking composed yet lonely, hearing the movement, he turned around and asked just one question. Do you like me? Catherine instinctively wanted to deny it, but he continued calmly. You blush every time you see me. Remember all my taboos and preferences, and came to be my secretary as soon as you graduated. Don't tell me all these are just coincidences. With every word he said, her face turned completely red, not knowing whether it was from shyness or guilt. In the dead silence, he suddenly handed her a bank card. Last night was an accident. I have someone I like. I can't respond to your feelings, nor can I take responsibility for you. I heard from Dorothy that you come from an ordinary family. The money in this card is enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. Just forget about all this. Catherine was stunned. Only then did she remember that he had indeed been calling a name in bed last night. Harriet. According to Dorothy, Harriet was Brian's unforgettable first love. He loved her so much that even though she broke up with him and went abroad, having a string of rumored boyfriends overseas, he still insisted on waiting for her to come back. Catherine remembered a sentence Dorothy once said when she was complaining. Our Carter family members are all cold-hearted, but somehow my brother turned out to be such a passionate person. He's waited for so many years and said that except for her, everyone else is just a compromise. And he doesn't want to settle for less. She deeply understood that sentence. At that moment, thinking of it again, she suddenly summoned up the courage to stop Brian who was about to leave. I don't want the money. I just want you to give me a chance. Mr. Brian, please try being with me. If she doesn't come back, or if she comes back but you still haven't let go of her, on that day, I will leave on my own initiative. Facing her eyes full of love, Brian was stunned for a few seconds and then left with as you wish. Since then, Catherine was his secretary during the day and his private lover at night. They left countless absurd traces in the office, in the Maybach, and by the villa's French windows. 4 years passed, and no one knew about this relationship between them, and she was content with it. Until a few days ago, on his birthday, Catherine prepared many surprises to celebrate for him. But until the early morning, instead of seeing him, she received a post on WeChat Moments. The best birthday gift is to get back what was lost. Brian, who had never posted on Moments before, showed a photo of himself kissing Harriet under the sky full of fireworks. Seeing this photo, the color drained from Catherine's face, and her heart tightened, holding on to the last glimmer of hope. She called him. It was Harriet who answered the phone. After saying, "Hello," several times and getting no response from Catherine, she started calling Brian. "Brian, who is this Catherine? She called you but isn't saying anything." Moments later, his deep and indifferent voice came through the speaker to Catherine's ears. "An unimportant person. Don't worry about it. Be good and go back to sleep for a while." At that moment, Catherine knew it was time for her to step aside. "Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day." Now the story begins. She packed her things and was about to leave when she bumped into Brian at the door. Since they used to sleep together every day before, for convenience, Catherine lived in his villa. But now, she couldn't stay any longer. Seeing her holding her things, his eyes slightly narrowed. But he didn't try to stop her. "Have you found a place to live?" "Yes. It's still the old rental apartment. I've talked to the landlord, and I'll rent it for a month." Hearing this, Brian frowned slightly. "A month? Why?" Catherine was about to explain, but he didn't seem very interested and said in a deep voice, "I'll give you a ride." She wanted to refuse, but Brian insisted. "It's snowing heavily, and it's very late. If anything happens to you, Dorothy will be sad." Catherine had to get in the car. Once, they had been intimate countless times in this car, but now she could hardly recognize it. There were all kinds of cute dolls in the car. The seat covers had been replaced with Hello Kitty ones, and snacks were placed everywhere. Catherine could hardly imagine that a man as decisive, cold, and abstinent as him would decorate the car like this. Perhaps noticing her gaze, Brian explained, "Harriet likes these." Catherine understood the meaning behind his words. After a long silence, she replied in a low voice, "You've finally waited for her to come back. Mr. Brian, I'm really happy for you." Brian didn't expect her to say this. His eyes darkened slightly, and he didn't say anything more. Halfway through the drive, Harriet called and said she wanted to build a snowman with him. He pulled over, wanting to rush over immediately, but then hesitated as he looked at the person beside him. Catherine knew what he was worried about and took the initiative to open the car door. "Mr. Brian, I'll take a taxi back." Brian gave a hum and got out of the car to help her move her things. Her hand slipped, and the suitcase fell to the ground. He bent down, and by the light of the street lamp, he saw the things scattered on the ground. His body froze for a moment. Love letters with his name on them that had never been sent. Photos of him that she had secretly taken at some unknown time. And things that he had casually thrown away but she had picked up and collected. Catherine's heart skipped a beat, and she hastily picked up the things in a flurry. "Sorry." Brian didn't say anything. He got in the car alone and drove away at high speed. Catherine waited in the snow for a long time but couldn't get a taxi. She wanted to carry the suitcase and walk home, but she was knocked down by an electric scooter. A gash more than 20 centimeters long appeared on her calf, and blood flowed all over the ground. Watching the hit-and-run vehicle drive away, she sucked in a breath of cold air in pain and lay in the snow for a long time before she could recover. After the pain subsided, she limped through the snow for 4 hours before finally returning to the rental apartment. After treating her wound, she turned on her phone and found that Brian had sent her a message after he left. "Don't be so infatuated with someone in the future. There are plenty of men out there. Don't stick to just one person like me." Catherine stared at this message for a long time. After dawn, she lit a fire downstairs and burned all the things in that suitcase, and the burning love that had been in her heart for 8 years also turned to ashes along with them. "Brian, I will do as you wish." After taking a 2-day weekend break, on Monday, Catherine went to the company on time. She handled her work as usual and informed Brian that there would be a meeting soon. When she reached the office, through the slightly ajar door, she saw Harriet. She was sitting in Brian's arms, feeding him half-eaten cookies. The man, who usually had a cleanliness obsession, smiled and ate them. He affectionately kissed her fingers and said in a gentle voice, "You mentioned yesterday that you wanted to eat the desserts from this place. I specifically queued up for 3 hours this morning to buy them. How do they taste?" "They taste great. Just as sweet but not greasy as before. You used to go a long way to buy them for me every now and then. Now that you're the president of the group, why did you still go yourself? You could just ask a secretary to do it." Brian gently massaged her ankle, and the tenderness in his eyes seemed to overflow. "I only want to do things related to you myself. I don't want to ask others to do them." A sweet smile appeared on Harriet's face, and she took the initiative to hug him and kissed him. He hugged her back and deepened the kiss, lost in it. Seeing this scene, Catherine's breath caught in her throat, and a pang of bitterness spread in her chest. She clenched her fingers tightly, her knuckles turning white, and her palms were a mess of blood. Time passed minute by minute, and the meeting time was approaching. Catherine composed herself and knocked on the door. "Mr. Brian, the meeting is about to start." Hearing her voice, Brian paused slightly, just as he was about to get up. Harriet pulled him back. "I don't want you to go. Stay with me for a while longer." Seeing her acting coquettishly, Brian's heart melted. Postpone the meeting for 2 hours. The project discussed in this meeting was related to the cooperation among several major groups in City B and was crucial to the company's future development. Catherine knew its significance but still couldn't help but remind him. "Several CEOs are already waiting in the meeting room." "Ugh, Brian, your secretary is so annoying. She really has no sense of occasion." Hearing Harriet's complaint, Brian's face turned cold. "I said, postpone it for 2 hours. Nothing is more important than Harriet." Catherine felt stuffy in her chest and could hardly breathe. But in the end, she just closed the door and turned away in silence. Everyone in the circle knew that Brian was a workaholic. No matter how busy he was with personal matters, even if he had just had an operation, he would still deal with his work while still recuperating. And this was the first time that he risked offending his business partners and postponed such an important meeting just because of a few words of coquetry. Did he really like Harriet that much? Catherine lowered her dim eyes, forced herself to gather her emotions, and walked into the meeting room to apologize to the directors. The Carter family was wealthy and powerful. Although these CEOs had their opinions, they didn't dare to discuss Brian, so they vented their anger on her. She didn't dare to refute and could only lower her head and listen to the scolding. After enduring it for 2 hours, Brian finally arrived. She dragged her sore and numb legs out of the meeting room but was stopped by Harriet again. "You're Catherine. Brian said you make great coffee. I think everyone in the office is a bit tired. Go and prepare a cup for everyone. For mine, add ice but no sugar." Catherine knew that Harriet was bossing her around, relying on Brian's favor, and didn't dare to disobey. So she went to the pantry. It took her 2 hours to make more than 400 cups of coffee and bring them out one by one. But as soon as Harriet took the first sip, her face changed. She picked up the cup and threw it at Catherine. The hard mug made a bloody hole on Catherine's forehead. Looking hideous and terrifying, she let out a muffled groan. Her whole face contorted in pain, and she fell to the ground covering the wound. Harriet still wasn't satisfied. She picked up one cup of coffee after another and kept throwing them at Catherine. Catherine's body was covered in bruises, and the broken ceramic pieces scratched a series of bloody marks on her. The brown coffee liquid soaked her entire body, and mixed with the crimson blood, it dripped onto the floor. She was in so much pain that she could only curl up and protect her head and chest. The office was completely silent. No one dared to step forward to dissuade Harriet, and they all watched from a distance as she vented her anger. Soon, the commotion attracted Brian. He looked at the messy scene on the ground and Catherine, who was lying on the ground covered in wounds, and his brows furrowed. "What happened?" Seeing him, Harriet immediately put on a pitiful look. "Brian, I asked your secretary to make me a cup of coffee. I'm on my period." And she added ice to the cup. "My stomach hurts so much." Looking at her red eyes, Brian's face instantly darkened. "You've been with me for 4 years, and you can't even do such a simple thing well. Or do you have a problem with Harriet and are deliberately targeting her?" Catherine raised her pale face and wanted to explain, but he didn't give her a chance to speak. He directly called his assistant. "Catherine has violated the company's regulations. Deduct her salary for this month and her quarterly bonus, and make a company-wide announcement. She will have to give a self-criticism at the meeting next week." After saying that, Brian took off his coat and left, holding Harriet in his arms. Watching his gradually disappearing figure, the tears that Catherine had held back for so long finally fell. She forced herself to get up, endured the pain, and brought a broom and a mop to clean up the cups and coffee on the floor. A few kind colleagues came to help, and their eyes were filled with pity when they looked at her. "I heard that young lady clearly said to add ice and no sugar. How could she shift the blame?" "Catherine, did you offend her in any way? Do you need to offend her? I've heard many people say that she's just so arrogant and domineering." She shows her temper at the slightest dissatisfaction. Many people in the circle can't stand her, but because Mr. Brian dotes on her, no one dares to mess with her. Sigh. I've never seen Mr. Brian like someone so much. Catherine, be more careful in your work in the future. We're just ordinary people and can't compare with these young ladies from wealthy families. She has Mr. Brian as her backer. Even if you're really wronged, you can only bear it. Catherine knew they meant well, but hearing these words, she felt a mix of emotions and couldn't say a word. Once, there was a problem with a contract she was handling. It was the fault of the client company, but they put the blame on her, facing the other party's condemnation and pressure. Brian always believed that it wasn't her fault. He argued strongly and finally cleared her of the false accusation. But now, with just a casual lie from Harriet, without verifying it and without giving her a chance to explain, he put all the blame on her. She had worked diligently, handling so many troubles for him. In the end, did he not even have this little bit of trust in her? Or in his heart? Right and wrong didn't matter, and all he cared about was making Harriet happy. Thinking of this, Catherine felt an unbearable sourness and a sharp pain in her heart. It took her a long time to clean up everything and dragged her tired body home. Just after she finished washing up, Brian's call came in again. Bring some brown sugar and warm baby pads over here. She prepared everything as quickly as possible and delivered them to his villa. After not seeing it for 2 or 3 days, the simple and elegant villa in her memory had also changed a great deal. The peach tree that Brian's grandfather had planted with his own hands was moved away and replaced with a garden of tulips. The black and white furniture in the rooms had all been replaced with the pink and yellow tones that Brian disliked the most. Countless pieces of jewelry, bags, and gifts were placed in the display cabinets. At a glance, it was the style that Harriet liked. Catherine silently looked at all this and walked to the bedroom with the light on and knocked on the door. After a while, Brian opened the door and took the things. Then he looked up at her. After washing off the coffee liquid, the wound on her face looked even more shocking, making him stunned for a moment. Is the injury this serious? Have you been to the hospital? Catherine didn't say anything and shook her head. He pressed his eyebrows, and his tone was rarely gentle. Harriet was just not feeling well and didn't mean to take it out on you. Don't take it to heart. The salary I deducted will be added to your year-end bonus at the end of the year. Go to the hospital later. If it's serious, take a few days off. I'll approve the leave. And you don't need to go through the procedure. No need. I will. Catherine wanted to tell him that she was going to resign at the end of this month. But he didn't listen to the end. Instead, he handed her a card and interrupted her. Be obedient. I still need you to help organize a welcome banquet for Harriet. Take a good rest and get your body in good shape. The words that she didn't finish were stuck in Catherine's throat. She gave a hum, took the card, and left the villa. The moment the door closed, she heard Harriet's coquettish voice. Brian, isn't the brown sugar water heated up yet? I want you to rub my stomach. I'll be right there. Lie still and don't move around. Hearing his gentle tone like flowing water, Catherine smiled silently, and a trace of self-mockery flashed in her eyes. She also had severe menstrual cramps. Several times, she fainted from the pain in the company and was sent to the hospital by her colleagues. When he knew about it, he just approved the leave. He didn't come to see her, let alone prepare any brown sugar water or warm baby pads. At that time, she thought he was too busy to spare the time. But now it seemed that it was just because he didn't like her. So he didn't care. After leaving the villa, Catherine went to the hospital and had her wound bandaged a little. After resting at home for a few days, she received the banquet plan sent by the assistant, from the selection of flowers to the types of desserts, and then to the attire of the waiters. All the requirements were very strict. Catherine only had 3 days. She could only cheer herself up and prepare for everything. After working hard for a long time, the banquet she prepared officially started at 7 o'clock in the evening. Harriet made an entrance in a high-end custom-made dress, drawing the attention of the whole audience. The guests gathered around to flatter her, making her extremely happy. We haven't seen each other for years, and Miss Harriet is still as noble, elegant, and radiant as she used to be. Such a grand welcome banquet shows that Mr. Brian's love for you has never changed. I remember when we were at school, someone confessed to Harriet. After Mr. Brian found out, he directly forced the person to transfer schools. He tore up every love letter that was sent. when someone talked about Harriet behind her back. He went to teach those hooligans a lesson and broke their bones. Everyone in the circle knows that Harriet is Mr. Brian's first love and the apple of his eye. Look at the jewelry on Harriet. It must be worth tens of millions. Right. This dress is also a custom-made one. The only one in the world. Mr. Brian has always been willing to spare no expense to make Harriet happy. Catherine stood not far away and listened silently without saying a word. Harriet walked over triumphantly and looked at her with disdain in her eyes. You did a good job with the banquet. But there is a small problem. There is no carpet in the hall. And my dress is dirty. To make up for this mistake, you come and hold up my dress for me. Catherine lowered her head and spoke in a neither humble nor haughty tone. Please wait a moment. There is still carpet in the backstage. I will immediately ask someone to lay it down. Seeing that she dared to refuse, Harriet's face darkened immediately. Brian just came in. Seeing that she was unhappy, he immediately came up to her. What's the matter? Brian, I don't want to dirty my dress. I asked your secretary to hold up my dress for me, but she refused. Is she still holding a grudge against me for what happened last time? Seeing Harriet's aggrieved look, Brian quickly hugged her into his arms and looked at Catherine with a serious expression. It's just a matter of holding up the dress. It's originally your duty. It's not your first day as a secretary. Can't you handle such a small thing? The surrounding guests also started talking, making sarcastic remarks. A secretary dares to show Miss Harriet a bad face. She should know her place. Different people have different fates. The young lady was born to be doted on. For some people, being asked to hold up the dress at a banquet is already a favor. Don't be ungrateful. Hearing these sarcastic remarks, Catherine's eyes dimmed. She suppressed those embarrassing emotions, bent down, and held up the dress. Harriet pulled Brian to wander around upstairs and downstairs, deliberately torturing her. The hem of the dress was inlaid with many pearls. Catherine's hands were sore and numb from holding it up, but she could only endure it. Harriet still didn't let it go. She asked someone to bring a lot of wine and beckoned to her. I don't feel like drinking today, but my friends were kind enough to come to the banquet, and I can't refuse. You drink all this wine for me. I'm allergic to alcohol. Brian, look at her. Just as Catherine was about to explain, Harriet started acting coquettishly. Brian also knew that she was allergic to alcohol, but to make Harriet happy, he could only agree. Don't you always carry your allergy medicine with you? Take the medicine and then drink. There shouldn't be any problem. His tone that brooked no refusal made Catherine's heart sink to the bottom. Her face turned a little paler, and she silently took out the medicine and took a few pills. Soon, a group of people came up with wine glasses to chat. She also picked up the wine and gulped it down her throat, glass after glass. Her stomach was in turmoil, and she couldn't stop the urge to vomit. Her mind was as confused as if filled with paste, and she felt dizzy. Her vision in front of her became blurred. In a state of dizziness, Catherine heard Harriet let out a scream. Brian, the necklace you gave me is gone. Just now. Only your secretary was close to me. She must have stolen it with her dirty hands. Hearing this groundless accusation, Catherine regained her clarity for a short moment. Mr. Brian, it wasn't me. Brian looked at Harriet's red eyes and then at Catherine, who was completely drunk. His expression became more serious. There were a lot of people just now, and it's easy to get confused. Maybe it's just lost. Let's look around first. But Harriet was persistent. She shook off his hand forcefully. Who else could it be if it wasn't her? Because it's a necklace you gave me. I'm so worried. But you still want to protect her. Since you won't search her, then don't come to me again in the future. As she said that, she was about to leave in a huff. Brian quickly hugged her and coldly called the bodyguards. The next second, several bodyguards pinned Catherine to the ground and tore at her clothes. Her mind went blank with a bang. She struggled desperately, but she couldn't resist the brute force of these people. Her shirt was torn into strips. Her skirt was also ripped apart, and her skin was scratched and turned purple, red, and covered in bloodstains. An overwhelming sense of humiliation welled up in her heart, making her unable to help crying out for help. I didn't do it. It really wasn't me. But her cries for help only brought more brutal treatment. Several bodyguards grabbed her underwear, and it seemed that they were about to pull it off. Brian couldn't bear to watch and was about to stop them when several waiters ran over. We found it. The necklace fell on the stairs. In an instant, The eyes of the whole hall were focused on the dazzling diamond necklace in their hands. Brian's tightly furrowed brows relaxed a bit. He waved his hand and asked the bodyguards to step back. Then, he picked up the necklace and personally put it around Harriet's neck. And his tone softened a bit. The necklace has been found. Don't be angry anymore. Okay. Harriet then stopped crying and smiled. She looked at Catherine, who was in a terrible mess on the ground, and hugged his arm, acting coquettishly again. Fortunately, it was found. Otherwise, I would have been sad for a long time. But your secretary has suffered so much humiliation because of this. Should I apologize to her? For a moment, the eyes of the whole audience fell on Catherine, who was in disarray. Facing these malicious gazes, she could only curl up into a ball and hug herself tightly. In the midst of endless pain, she heard Brian's cold voice. No need to apologize. She's just a secretary. It's no big deal for her to suffer a little humiliation. This simple sentence was like a sharp blade stabbing into Catherine's chest, making a mess of her heart. Her already broken heart felt as if it was about to be torn apart, making her feel miserable. Her mind was buzzing, and her eyes were left with only a numb emptiness. She didn't know when everyone in the hall had left, leaving only the dazzling lights that clearly illuminated the wounds on her body. She endured the pain and got up, picked up the coat that a kind waiter had thrown beside her, wrapped it around herself, and stumbled away from there. It was pouring rain outside, and she walked into the rain without realizing it. The cold raindrops slapped her face and then slid down one by one, much like tears, but she couldn't shed a single tear anymore. She didn't know where she was going and wandered aimlessly through the streets. After a while, a car stopped beside her. The car window rolled down, revealing Brian's cold and handsome face. Get in the car. Catherine ignored him as if she hadn't heard and dragged her heavy body forward with difficulty in the rain. Brian frowned, and his voice became more forceful. Get in the car. Catherine stopped in her tracks and raised her pale face, which was completely bloodless, to look at him. Don't bother caring about me, Mr. Brian. I'm just a secretary. Her frosty tone made Brian's heart tremble violently. He opened the car door, walked up to her in the rain, and tightly grasped her hand. I didn't handle things well tonight, but I've already lost Harriet once, and I can't afford to lose her a second time. I will find a way to make up for the humiliation you've suffered. Don't be angry with me because of this. This time, Catherine didn't compromise anymore. She used up her last bit of strength to break free from his grip, took a few steps back, and her voice was as lifeless as still water. You're joking, Mr. Brian. How dare an ordinary person like me be angry with you and Miss Harriet, a young lady and a young master? I was too naive and ridiculous before and couldn't see my own position clearly. From now on, I will always remember that I'm just a secretary and won't bother your life anymore. Are you satisfied? Can you let me go now? The more she said this, the angrier Brian became. His face turned cold, and his emotions were already out of control. You clearly know that's not what I meant. I've never looked down on you. I said those things just to appease Harriet. In my heart, you and Dorothy. She didn't hear a word of what he said next. The scene in front of her became more and more blurred, and her eyelids felt as heavy as if filled with lead and drooped down. All her strength was exhausted, and she tilted her body and lost consciousness. I don't know how long it had passed. When Catherine opened her eyes again, she found herself in the hospital. Her wet clothes had been changed. The wounds on her body had been treated and bandaged, and there were medicine and hot water placed by the bedside. The nurse was adjusting the drip. When she saw that Catherine was awake, she gave a kind smile. You're awake. Your boyfriend stayed by your side all night yesterday and just left. Catherine opened her dry lips, and her voice was extremely hoarse. He's not my boyfriend. He never was. Her relationship with Brian had just been an accident from the very beginning. Except for the identity of a secretary, he had never admitted any other relationship between them. In the past, she had deceived herself and fantasized about the future. But now, she just wanted to wake herself up, then leave here forever and never come back. After staying in the hospital for a few days, Brian didn't come again. He just asked the assistant to send a message, telling her to rest assured and recuperate and go back to work when she was better. Catherine didn't wrong herself anymore. She didn't leave the hospital until she had completely recovered her overworked body. During this period, the company's small group was very lively, and everyone was discussing things about Brian and Harriet. He booked Disney for a week to celebrate her birthday, and the gorgeous fireworks burned for 3 days without stopping. He took her to the family banquet and gave her the bracelet that was only passed down to the daughter-in-law. He bought a piece of land and planned to build a private ski resort, and the name was closely related to Harriet. Catherine quietly looked at these messages, and there was no ripple in her heart anymore. After being discharged from the hospital, she clocked in for work as usual and was meticulous in her work. However, when it came to matters that needed Brian's attention, she would entrust them to other colleagues of the secretariat. After finally having a quiet week, Brian called her again. After she delivered the documents he wanted, she was about to leave but was stopped. "I'm going to a meeting. Harriet doesn't like eating alone. You stay here and keep her company." Her face froze. Just as she was about to refuse, Harriet habitually started ordering her around. "I like eating shrimp. Peel a plate for me first." Brian closed the door of the study, and Catherine could only swallow her words and walked to the dining table. After peeling a plate of shrimp, Harriet asked someone to bring a large plate of walnuts and jackfruits. "I also want to have some fruit after the meal. There are no tools here. You can do it with your bare hands." Looking at the hard nutshells and sharp thorns, Catherine's heart sank. She knew that Harriet was deliberately trying to torture her, but she could only do as she was told. After peeling the walnuts and opening the jackfruit, both of her hands were pricked and bleeding profusely. Harriet still wouldn't let her go and forced her to go to the kitchen to bring out the soup. The soup that had just been cooked on the stove burned her hands red. She was in so much pain that she couldn't hold it anymore. Her hand slipped, and the boiling soup spilled all over her. As the steam rose, within seconds, several blisters appeared on her hands. The searing pain came, and she bit her lip hard to hold back the groans of pain. Seeing Catherine falling to the ground, Harriet was overjoyed. The next second, seeing the door of the study open, she immediately put away her smile and began to scold her hypocritically. "I heard from Brian that you're capable. How can you not even carry a bowl of soup properly and spill it?" Scalding my hand. Hearing this, Brian immediately became nervous and ran over in big strides. "Where were you scalded? Let me see. Does it hurt?" Harriet raised the hand that she had just pinched red for him to see and squeezed out 2 tears. A few drops splashed on it. "I don't know if it will leave a scar. How do you do things? Harriet has been pampered since she was a child and has never been hurt. You scalded her just by carrying a bowl of soup. Don't you know to stay away?" Brian's face darkened, and he couldn't help scolding Catherine a few words, but when he saw the injuries on her body, he couldn't say anything too harsh. He could only pick up Harriet and go to deal with the injury. Before going out, seeing that she was still standing there in a daze, he called her in a deep voice. "You go to the hospital with us and get treated together." Catherine could only endure the pain and get in the car. On the way, Brian drove very fast. Harriet didn't want him to find out that she was faking it, so she cried out in pain from time to time. He felt so sad that he would look at her sideways every once in a while, with his attention extremely distracted. He didn't see the sports car speeding towards them. With a bang, the 2 cars collided head-on. Under the strong inertia, Catherine's body uncontrollably hit the car door. It felt as if her internal organs had shifted, and intense pain came from all over her body. Gurgling blood welled up, dyeing her world bright red. Her body couldn't stop trembling. She barely opened her eyes and saw Brian carrying Harriet out of the car. The sound of the ambulance came from a distance. In a daze, she heard 2 urgent voices. "Sir, this lady has just fainted from excessive shock. The injured person in the back seat is bleeding heavily and is more seriously injured. If she's not sent to the hospital in time, there may be a life-threatening danger." "No, we must send Harriet to the hospital first. I will never let anything happen to her. Nothing else is more important than her safety." Brian's impatient and panicked roar became the last sound Catherine heard before she fell into a coma. The boundless darkness surged up and completely engulfed her. Catherine felt as if she had a very long nightmare. After waking up from the dream, she opened her eyes and saw Dorothy with red eyes. "Catherine, I just got back to the country and heard that you had an accident and were hospitalized. The doctor said you had a massive hemorrhage and almost couldn't be saved. I was so scared." Seeing her, all the grievances that Catherine had suppressed in her heart welled up. Her eyes turned red, and she couldn't hold back anymore and hugged her. "Don't be afraid. I'm okay. The two sisters didn't know how long they hugged each other. Then Dorothy poured a glass of water and fed it to her. Remembering the doctor's instructions, she started talking about some light topics. Have you been happy in the country these past few years? Has my brother bullied you? Didn't you have a boyfriend? When are you going to introduce him to me? I have to examine him carefully. If he treats you badly, I won't agree to you being together. Catherine's expression froze. Mr. Brian is strict in separating public and private affairs and hasn't bullied me. The boyfriend. We've already broken up. Dorothy didn't expect them to break up so soon. Afraid that she would be sad, she quickly comforted her. It doesn't matter. As the old saying goes, break up and move on. The next one will be better. I know a lot of handsome guys and will introduce them all to you. Before she finished speaking, the door of the ward was pushed open, and Brian walked in with a serious face. Introduce what? Don't introduce anyone. None of the playboys you know are suitable. Hearing him veto it right away, Dorothy immediately pouted. What playboys? Brother, don't talk nonsense. Okay, those people have only had 2 or 3 girlfriends. Do you think everyone is as affectionate as you? Sticking to Harriet. Besides, I'm introducing a boyfriend to my sister. Why do you have to interfere in this? Hearing this, a surge of anger rose in Brian's heart, and his tone was filled with anger. I said no introduction means no introduction. Feelings can't be forced. Don't play matchmaker randomly. Yes, feelings can't be forced. It was a pity that it took her 4 years to understand this truth. Catherine smiled silently, pulled Dorothy's hand, and looked at him calmly. Dorothy was just joking. Mr. Brian, is there anything you want to talk about? Seeing that she was safe and sound, Brian relaxed a little. He instinctively wanted to say that he came to see her, but when the words came to his mouth, he changed the meaning. It's nothing. Dorothy heard that you had an accident and came to the hospital as soon as she got off the plane. I came to take her home and stopped by to see you. Okay, brother, I'll go home tonight. You can leave now. Catherine is seriously injured, so you're not allowed to assign her any work. After Dorothy finished speaking, she drove him out. Only the two sisters were left in the room, and Dorothy started speaking well of Brian again. Don't think my brother is fierce. He treats you very well. The nurse said that you were on the verge of death yesterday, and it was him who transferred blood from all over the city to save you. Hearing this, Catherine was stunned for a moment, but after a moment, she regained her clarity. He transferred blood from all over the city, just didn't want her to die. However, between her and Harriet, if one of them had to die, that person would definitely be her. So, she wouldn't have any illusions about him anymore. In the last few days in City B, Catherine has been recuperating in the hospital. When the nurses came to do the rounds, they would occasionally mention things about the VIP ward upstairs. It is said that the president of Brian's group has booked the whole floor and even invited those retired professors in City B to take care of his girlfriend. I've seen it several times. Mr. Brian personally brought tea and water to his girlfriend, bought a lot of jewelry and gifts to make her happy, stayed by the bedside all night without sleeping. He's so doting. Catherine listened to these gossips silently and raised her hand to touch her chest. There was no feeling there, just a slightly slow heartbeat. It seemed that the wound in her heart was about to heal. On the day she was discharged from the hospital, Dorothy had planned to pick her up but was held up by things at home. Catherine soothed her a few words and left the hospital alone and went back to the company. Today was her last day at work, and she went through the resignation process as required. She was holding a box and was about to leave when she met Harriet at the elevator entrance, holding a cup of coffee. She deliberately bumped into Catherine. Don't you watch where you're going? You've stained my dress, time and time again. Are you doing it on purpose? Harriet staged this act and then called the bodyguards, asking them to force her to kneel at the entrance of the company headquarters to apologize. Catherine refused to give in, but she went even further and poured the remaining half cup of coffee on her face. What are you looking at? Are you not convinced? I'm telling you, Brian only has me in his heart. No matter what I do, he will go along with me, not to mention punishing you. A mere secretary. After saying these words arrogantly, she left with a haughty look on her face. The bodyguards dragged Catherine downstairs and forced her to kneel on the ground. She kept struggling but couldn't break free and could only try to reason with them. I've already resigned and am no longer Brian's secretary. What right do you have to force me to kneel as punishment? The bodyguards were completely unmoved and their tone was extremely cold. Mr. Brian has ordered that Miss Harriet's will is his will. No matter what request she makes, we must comply. Secretary Catherine, save these words for Mr. Brian. These words completely blocked the words that Catherine hadn't finished. She knew that no matter how much she said, they wouldn't listen, so she gave up struggling. Colleagues and passers-by who came and went saw her and were secretly discussing, and some were even taking photos. In the cold winter, she knelt outside for a full 7 hours, and her knees were skinned. Her face turned purple from the cold, and she kept shivering. She managed to hold on with her willpower. As it was almost time to get off work, Catherine's consciousness was already a bit confused. Suddenly, she heard someone calling her name. She forced herself to look up and saw Dorothy running towards her. Catherine, you just got out of the hospital. Why are you kneeling here? Who is deliberately torturing you? Catherine's throat was dry, and she instinctively said, "It's Harriet." Hearing this name, Dorothy was filled with anger. She supported her and rushed into Brian's office. "Harriet, don't push people too far. Catherine didn't offend you. Why did you make her kneel as punishment? She's my brother's secretary and has nothing to do with you. Who do you think you are? Acting like the president's wife here." Brian was also in the office. Seeing Catherine's embarrassed appearance, he frowned. Just as he was about to ask what had happened, Harriet threw herself into his arms. "Brian, I didn't do it. I have no grudges against Secretary Catherine. How could I suddenly punish her to kneel? I don't know where I offended her that she would slander me like this." Hearing Harriet's false accusation, Dorothy was so angry that she directly rushed up to Harriet and slapped her. "You're lying. Catherine never lies." Harriet had never been treated like this in her life. She covered her face and burst into tears. "Brian, your secretary slandered me like this, and now even your sister is helping her bully me. Fine, you're a family, and we're breaking up." Hearing these words, Brian's expression panicked, and then he stood up with a cold face and slapped Dorothy. "Enough. Dorothy, how long are you going to make a scene? Harriet is your sister-in-law." Then, he looked at Catherine coldly again. "Why are you slandering Harriet for no reason? If there's a next time, you don't have to be a secretary anymore." Dorothy covered her face and looked at her brother in shock. Catherine regretted involving her and quickly pulled her away. Dorothy was still angry and wanted to go back and argue for her. Catherine had no choice but to tell her the news that she had already resigned and planned to leave City B. She shook her head and told her with a choke in her voice. Hearing that she was leaving, Dorothy was both reluctant and sad. She didn't care about causing trouble anymore and hugged her and cried, begging her not to go. Catherine just stroked her back with red eyes. "Dorothy, all good things must come to an end." Dorothy cried even harder. On the last day in City B, the two sisters went to have a meal together, feeling a lot of emotion. At night, Dorothy didn't go back either and squeezed into the small rental room with her. Catherine repeatedly assured her that even if she went home, she would contact her every day. If she had a blind date partner she liked, she would tell her immediately. The two of them talked all night, chatting about the past, the present, and the future. When it was dawn, she personally sent Catherine to the airport. When the two of them were saying goodbye reluctantly, a message from Brian came, asking where Dorothy was. She was still resentful about what had happened last night and was about to call and scold him when Catherine quickly stopped her. "Forget it, Dorothy. Let the past be the past. Don't have any more conflicts with Harriet for my sake. After all, your brother really loves her. In the future, she will be your sister-in-law, and you should get along well with her." Hearing this, Dorothy's eyes turned red again. Soon, it was time to board the plane. She waved goodbye to Dorothy and turned to enter the boarding gate. Before getting on the plane, she sent Brian one last message. 8 years of secret love and 4 years of absurdity. It all ends here. "Mr. Brian, from now on, I'm no longer your secretary, and I no longer like you. We'll go our separate ways, and we don't have to see each other for the rest of our lives." After sending it, she didn't care about the reply and directly blocked all his contact information. Then, she stepped onto the plane without looking back. When this message was sent, Brian was drying his hair. When he heard the sound of his phone, he was about to pick it up when Harriet took it first. "Let me take a look for you." She waved the phone and smiled sweetly. Brian couldn't do anything about her and smiled and said okay. His phone had long been set up with Harriet's fingerprint recognition. The woman skillfully opened Catherine's chat window and saw that message. A trace of disdain flashed in her eyes, and she deleted the message with a flick of her finger. On the first day she came back, she already knew about the matter between Brian and Catherine. In her opinion, this was just Catherine's wishful thinking. Everyone knew that Brian was a passionate person who loved her to the core. How could he like someone else? After deleting that message, she also saw a lot of work emails from business partners, and she deleted them all together. At this time, Brian had also finished drying his hair. The man, still with the smell of shower gel, leaned over and hugged her. What was the message? Harriet turned around and hugged him back, and the phone was placed aside. It's a harassing message. Don't worry about it. Shall we continue? She smiled, and from time to time, some glimpses of her body were revealed under her nightgown, making Brian's eyes heat up. The man's Adam's apple moved, and he nodded and said, "Okay." He didn't care about his phone anymore and carried Harriet to the bed. After a night of intimacy, Brian was still sleeping when his phone suddenly rang. He didn't want to pay attention to it at first, but the ringtone kept ringing, and it annoyed him so much. He clearly didn't have any work today. Looking at the woman still sleeping in his arms, Brian picked up the phone, lowered his voice, but his face was full of impatience. "What's the matter? It's the weekend today, and there shouldn't be any work arrangements." On the other end of the line was his other secretary, who answered in a flustered tone. "Our business partners sent you emails yesterday, and they're coming for a meeting today. They're already here now. Mr. Brian, everyone is waiting for you." "What? When did this happen? I didn't receive any emails at all." Brian's drowsiness was immediately dispelled. He sat up and quickly went to change his clothes, frowning deeply. Why didn't Catherine inform me about such an important matter? What on earth is she doing? Can she afford to bear the major losses to the company if there are any? Let Catherine come to pick me up immediately. There was anger in his tone. He thought Catherine was still angry, so she was ignoring matters related to work. However, the assistant on the other end was stunned for a moment and spoke with a bit of caution. "Mr. Brian, Secretary Catherine has already resigned." These words were like a bolt of thunder striking his head. Brian couldn't help but grip his phone tightly. "When did this happen? Did I approve her resignation? Tell her to come back quickly. She's not allowed to resign until I give my consent." At this moment, he didn't care that Harriet was still sleeping in bed and roared as he spoke. How dare Catherine resign? Just because of those trivial matters. He had clearly said that Harriet was the most important person in his life, and he would find a way to compensate her for all the grievances she had suffered. Yet she chose to resign without saying a word. The man's eyes darkened. He was obviously extremely angry, scaring the secretary on the other end of the phone so much that she was trembling and dared not speak. Just as his patience was about to run out, a slender arm wrapped around his waist. "What's wrong, Brian?" It was Harriet. She spoke softly as if she had just been woken up. Seeing her like this, Brian couldn't help but soften his voice. "It's a work matter. You don't need to worry about it. Go back to sleep." He planned to go to the company, no matter what. The business partners couldn't be offended, but Harriet hugged him and acted coquettishly without caring. "Stay and sleep with me. It's still early. Brian, don't leave me, okay?" Her gentle words made his Adam's apple move, and he thought of what had happened last night. He couldn't help but hug Harriet into his arms and lie back on the bed. By the time he had coaxed her to sleep, half an hour had passed, and his phone was full of calls from his secretary. His eyes darkened, and he replied to the message, "Reschedule today's meeting for the afternoon." Soon, the secretary replied to him, "Mr. Brian, the people have already left, and the contract has fallen through." His heart tightened, but then looking at the sweet sleeping face of the person in his arms, he felt that it was all worth it. He raised the corners of his mouth and then dropped them, remembering what was weird that the secretary had said. Brian clicked into his email. There were no new emails. He remembered that Harriet had looked at his phone last night. With a trace of expectation, he clicked into the recycle bin, and then his face turned pale, and he gritted his teeth. In the recycle bin, there were indeed several emails sent by business partners, and the time was exactly when he hadn't had time to look at his phone last night. And the only person who had touched his phone last night was Harriet. There was anger in his heart. Harriet didn't understand anything but had taken it upon herself to delete his work emails. Losing this order would mean that his company would lose at least 10% of its profits. Moreover, for such an important meeting today, Catherine didn't inform him. In the past, even if an email had been sent once, Catherine would have prepared everything in the morning. If it weren't for her being petty, how could they have lost the business partners so easily? He dialed Catherine's number, wanting to question her, but no one answered. No matter how many times he called, it was the same electronic voice. His heart suddenly panicked. Thinking of something, he clicked into the recycle bin and looked again. He found the message that Catherine had sent him, and the time was last night. He clicked to restore it, and the message popped up, stinging his eyes. 8 years of secret love and 4 years of absurdity. It all ends here. Mr. Brian, from now on, I'm no longer your secretary, and I no longer like you. We'll go our separate ways, and we don't have to see each other for the rest of our lives. Somehow, upon seeing this message, he should have felt relieved. Catherine finally no longer liked him. Just as he had said, she was no longer clinging to him. But when he really faced the news of her leaving, his heart actually felt a suffocating pain, as if he had lost something important. He couldn't help but recall his past with Catherine. 4 years ago, an accident had led them to end up in bed together. At that time, all he could think of was Harriet, and he just wanted to use money to send away his sister's good friend. He had never thought of starting anything with her, but Catherine had bright eyes and was very cautious, like a small animal, making it impossible for him to have the heart to refuse. He could only tacitly allow all of this to happen. They had been intimate in various places, and everywhere had left traces belonging to each other. In the 4 years, she had been his best secretary and his best lover. She had never taken the initiative to ask for anything, only silently bearing his demands. Even though she was with him without a proper name or status, she had been content. Brian had thought countless times in his heart that Catherine was really a stupid person. With just a little bit of kindness, she had given her all. He had told her not to dream of a future with him, that he would only belong to Harriet. Now that he had finally gotten rid of this little tale as he had wished, why wasn't he as happy as he had thought he would be? He looked at that message for a long time. Finally, he didn't pay any more attention to it. If Catherine had left, then let her leave. This was the path they should each take. He put down his phone, stopped looking at it, and comfortably hugged Harriet to continue sleeping. To suppress that uncomfortable feeling in his heart, he pushed his work back for several days and accompanied Harriet to have fun. No matter what jewelry or high-end custom-made dresses she took a fancy to, he bought them without hesitation. But the more he did this, the more uneasy he felt, and a lingering sense of irritability always lingered between his brows. Harriet didn't notice this at all and threw herself wholeheartedly into having fun. While waiting for her, Brian couldn't help but take out his phone and click on the chat window with Catherine. The last chat had been a month ago. Since Harriet had come back, he hadn't contacted her at all. An impulse welled up in his heart, and his fingers slowly typed and sent a message. You can come back and continue being my secretary at any time. The step he thought he was offering was blocked by a bright red exclamation mark and didn't reach that person. This was the first time in all these years that Catherine had blocked him. Brian's hand trembled a little, and he stared fixedly at the screen until Harriet came back. Brian, sorry to keep you waiting. Shall we go see the aurora tomorrow? The woman had changed into a beautiful dress and was hugging his arm and acting coquettishly. He turned off his phone and didn't show any abnormality. But he also had no intention of admiring her beauty. I should go back to the company tomorrow. I haven't been there for so long, and there's a lot of official business piled up. How about I accompany you to have fun after I deal with it? As the president of the company, there were already many major decisions to be made and important meetings waiting for him. It was already a stretch for him to spare these few days in order to accompany Harriet. His company had been incurring losses during this period. The woman frowned and was obviously a bit unhappy, so she could only pout. Okay, but I want to go with you. I'll help you. Brian. Harriet smiled, making him feel a little sweeter in his heart and forgetting about Catherine. When he arrived at the company, several secretaries immediately surrounded him. Mr. Brian, you're finally here. This is the profit and loss situation of the company during this period. These are the business partners who want to cancel the cooperation with us. The situation is very urgent. And this is the personnel turnover situation of the company during this period. A group of senior employees are discussing resigning. Brian frowned deeply. Why had things gotten into such a mess just because he hadn't been to the company for a while? He took those documents, felt a headache from reading them, and threw them heavily on the ground. What on earth are you all doing? I've only been away for a few days, and the company has actually suffered so much loss. Couldn't you have tried to retain those business partners until I came back? With a bang, the folder made a huge noise when it hit the ground. All the secretaries didn't dare to speak. After a while, one of them finally spoke up in a low voice. These things were usually done by Secretary Catherine. Mr. Brian. Then, he instinctively wanted to call her over. But then he remembered that Catherine had already resigned a long time ago. His face darkened several shades, and he replied gloomily, "If Catherine could do those things, why can't you?" No one dared to speak anymore. Everyone had seen Catherine's dedication over the past 4 years and admitted that they couldn't do as well as her. In the momentarily silent office, Harriet let out a few coquettish laughs. "Don't be angry, Brian. It's just that a secretary left. I'll do it. I'm sure I'll do it better than Catherine. You can take a rest first, and I'll help you with these things." Brian smiled gratifyingly. "Thank you for your trouble, Harriet. From now on, you all listen to Harriet." After saying that, Brian took those important documents and went back to deal with them, leaving Harriet and the other secretaries where they were. As soon as the person left, Harriet's expression changed. She swept a glance at those secretaries, suddenly slapped each of them, and sneered as she spoke. "I think you're all shameless. You were so close to Mr. Brian just now. What were you trying to do? Seduce him?" These words scared those secretaries. They covered their faces and quickly explained. "How could that be? We were just doing our jobs. Don't slander us out of thin air." Harriet didn't listen to their words. She called the bodyguards and dragged the secretaries away, not allowing them to appear in the company anymore. After doing all this, she deliberately changed into a professional outfit. Her thighs were wrapped in black stockings, and she wore a tight-fitting pencil skirt that barely reached the top of her thighs. With a slight bend, everything could be seen at a glance. She knocked on the office door. After getting Brian's response, she swayed her waist and walked in. "Mr. Brian," she spoke in a seductive tone, with her eyes full of charm. But now there were too many company affairs, and Brian didn't have the intention to be intimate. He called out in a low voice and frowned slightly. "Harriet, why are you dressed like this? It's too busy now. Let's focus on work first." "Okay." Ignoring Brian's refusal, Harriet sat on the man's lap, revealing all her charm. "We can be busy later, Brian." As she said that, the woman's arms wrapped around him, and she leaned against Brian's arms as if her bones were boneless. His Adam's apple moved, and he couldn't resist the temptation. He picked Harriet up and placed her on the desk, and a burning kiss fell. It was only at noon that the two of them stopped. Harriet's stockings had been torn, and there were scattered red marks on her neck. Brian's collar was also in a mess. He looked at his watch. It was already this late, and his secretary still hadn't brought the meal. If it were Catherine, she would never have forgotten such a thing. His expression was displeased, and he called the secretary. "What's going on? You even forgot to bring the meal. Do you all not want to work anymore?" "Mr. Brian, we've all been driven out by Miss Harriet. After thinking about it, we think it's better to end our work here. We don't have the same tolerance as Secretary Catherine and can't keep enduring it." The secretary blurted out, and there was helplessness in her tone. Brian didn't react at first and instinctively asked, "What happened to Catherine?" On the other end, the secretary sighed and sent a document over. "It's all in here, Mr. Brian." After saying that, she hung up the phone. Brian was suspicious and panicked. He clicked on this document and found that it was full of evidence of Harriet's self-directed and self-acted incidents. From the day she came back until today, every incident where she had blamed Catherine turned out to be a false accusation fabricated by her. The more Brian read, the more shocked he became. The emotions that had been suppressed in his heart could no longer be hidden. He had never expected that Harriet could do such a thing, and Catherine had actually suffered so many grievances during this period. At this moment, his heart seemed to stop beating. He stared at those words for a long time. Harriet lazily sat in the chair. Seeing that Brian was motionless for no apparent reason, She spoke in a coquettish voice. Brian, what's wrong? Didn't you say you were going to ask someone to bring the meal? I'm hungry. Then, Brian slowly turned his head, and the doting look he used to have for her was no longer in his eyes. Brian, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing, Harriet called out again, but Brian's expression remained the same, making her suddenly feel panicked. The man spoke coldly. Why did you do this? She didn't react. What are you talking about, Brian? But the next second, the man shouted like he had gone crazy. I'm asking you why you did this. Why did you slander Catherine? Although she was frightened by his tone, upon hearing the name of that secretary, Harriet was still confused. She's just a secretary. What's the big deal? Why are you so angry? Brian, didn't you say yourself that she's just a secretary? She spoke with such confidence that it suddenly made Brian lose his temper. Yes, it was he who had made her leave in the first place. Why was he so angry now? Harriet came closer and tried to hug him. Don't be angry, Brian. Let's go have a meal. But hearing that coquettish voice, Brian felt more and more irritable. All he could think of was Catherine's wronged face. He had actually chosen to hurt her time and time again instead of believing in her. How sad must she have been at that time? The more he thought about it, the more he felt out of breath. He didn't even have the patience to put on a good face and pushed Harriet away. You can go and eat by yourself if you want. I'm not in the mood right now. He didn't push hard, and the woman took a few steps back, but her face was full of disbelief. The man who had been obedient to her these days had actually pushed her away for someone else. And that person was Catherine, a secretary who had already resigned. Harriet's emotions suddenly exploded. Brian, what are you doing? You're treating me like this for Catherine, a secretary. Are you going to break up with me and chase that secretary back next? Harriet's words made Brian feel extremely uncomfortable. He didn't know what he was doing now, why he was feeling uncomfortable, or why he was sad. Shouldn't he be happy that Catherine had left? There shouldn't have been a start between them in the first place. But now, he could only clench his fists and try his best to control his emotions. I'm just too tired. You go and eat first. Harriet snorted coldly and ignored him, turning around and leaving straight away. Facing the mess in the office, Brian had a headache. Instead of asking someone to bring him food, he threw himself into his work, trying to make himself forget those things. He worked from afternoon until night before solving the problems that had occurred in the company during this period. Ridiculously, more than half of them were caused by Harriet. In order to clean up her mess, almost all of the company's profits for this year had been lost. He sat up straight, leaned against the chair, and took a deep breath. It was already dark outside. He looked at his phone again, and there were no messages. His heart felt empty, and an indescribable sense of fatigue and loneliness welled up in him. He was the only one left in the company now, and he couldn't help but speak. Catherine. This was the first time he had called out her name since she left. These 3 words seemed to have a magic spell. Once uttered, he couldn't help but think of more things about her. No matter how late it was, she would always accompany him to work and arrange everything in an orderly manner. They would be intimate in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows in the office. Catherine's face would turn red with shyness, as if the sunset glow was spread on it. And she was extremely cute. Her eyes were as innocent as a deer's. Every time she was severely bullied, there would be a glimmer of water in her eyes. But she didn't know that such an expression would only arouse more impulses. More and more memories flooded into his mind, and he could no longer control his emotions. He picked up his phone and dialed his sister's number. After dozens of seconds, which felt longer than half his life, he finally heard the other end answer and couldn't wait to speak. Dorothy, do you know where Catherine has gone? His sister laughed mockingly. Brother, you and Harriet are so in love. Why are you looking for Catherine? His Adam's apple moved, and he clenched his phone tightly with difficulty. I know everything. All those things that happened before were all staged by Harriet. I want to take Harriet to apologize to Catherine. She can come back, and I won't let Harriet make things difficult for her anymore. Before he could finish his words, this self-righteous apology was interrupted. Dorothy sneered. No need. Catherine doesn't need your apology anymore, and you'll never be able to find her for the rest of your life. After saying that, Dorothy hung up the phone, listening to the busy tone on the other end. A wave of regret and powerlessness welled up in his chest. He angrily threw his phone on the ground. Then he heard the sound of the office door opening. He stood up abruptly, thinking that the person he had been longing for had come back. Catherine. He looked towards the door full of hope. The person who came in wasn't the one he had been longing for. It was Harriet. The woman had obviously heard the name he blurted out. She couldn't figure out why a mere secretary was always competing with her. She looked at the dejected Brian and couldn't stand this contrast. Why is it always Catherine again? Brian, do you really like her? She questioned. Brian didn't answer. After realizing that the person who came in wasn't Catherine, he didn't care about this anymore. But seeing his appearance, it only made Harriet even more angry. There were tears in her eyes, and she was extremely aggrieved. She shouted hysterically, "She's just a secretary, a slut. I knew she had bad motives towards you the first day I came back. It's better that such a person left." Brian, didn't you say that you only love me? What do you mean now? Do you love her? Facing Harriet's continuous questioning, Brian's mind was in a mess, and he remained silent. But Harriet was used to a life of being doted on. The more she was ignored, the more she hated Catherine. She viciously threw the things on the desk. "I heard you just now. You asked where Catherine was. You still want to find her and bring her back. You do love her." Reaching the limit of his patience, the look in Brian's eyes when he looked at Harriet no longer had the love he used to have. He completely didn't understand why he had liked such a person. She was unreasonable, willful, and even forced Catherine to leave. Thinking of this, Brian couldn't hold back anymore. His eyes red. He replied, "So what if I've fallen in love with Catherine? Do you know what you've done during this period?" Once he started, he couldn't hold back his anger. Brian stepped closer. "You sent away all my secretaries and deleted the work emails on my phone without permission, causing several business partners to want to terminate the cooperation in the company. I gave you the authority, but you used it to show off and bully the employees, making them all threaten to resign. Do you know how much profit you've caused my company to lose these days? I can let all of that go. But why did you force Catherine to leave? You framed her again and again, which made her unable to bear it and leave me. You're right. I do like Catherine. I've fallen in love with her. You were gone for so long, and it was Catherine who accompanied me these past few years. Harriet, what right do you have to talk about her?" He roared, his eyes extremely dark, scaring Harriet. She couldn't help but tremble, and tears welled up in her eyes. But she still insisted. "Just because she's just a secretary. What is she?" Slap. Before she could finish her words, Brian raised his hand and slapped her hard. The clear sound shocked Harriet. He had actually hit her. The tears that had been on the verge of falling just now immediately streamed down. Harriet cried and started hitting out randomly. "You actually hit me. Brian, you actually hit me. You kept saying that you loved me, and now you're hitting me for a secretary." But her struggles were useless. After realizing his true feelings, the way Brian looked at her was like looking at someone he utterly disliked. He grabbed the woman's hand and slapped her again without mercy. With a heavy thud, Harriet was slapped and turned her head to the side. Her face immediately swelled up, but the anger in the man's eyes didn't subside. His words were icy cold. "Catherine has suffered much more grievances than this. What's hitting you? I want you to apologize to Catherine." The man's eyes were cold. If he had been a little soft-hearted towards her before, now there was no hesitation left. Now he only felt disgusted by her. He couldn't believe that he had done so many things for her and had been hurting Catherine all along. Brian's fingers clenched tightly, and his expression was filled with a chilling aura, making Harriet feel afraid. She had never seen Brian like this before. He had always been so good to her and had always fulfilled her every wish. It was all because of that woman, Catherine. Harriet's eyes were filled with venom, and she wished she could tear Catherine to pieces. Brian naturally saw this. He only hated himself for seeing her true face so late and letting Catherine suffer so many grievances for no reason. He gave a cold laugh, which was terrifying. "It's time to pay everything back to Catherine now." As he said that, he grabbed her and tried to drag her out. The man's angry appearance scared Harriet. Ignoring her dignity, she struggled desperately. But she couldn't break free. She was dragged outside, to the door of the office, and then several bodyguards came over and held her down. "Since you like making people kneel, you'll kneel until tomorrow." He ordered the bodyguards to keep an eye on her. Ignoring Harriet's cries behind him, he turned and left. All he could think of now was Catherine. Once he admitted that he loved her, He realized that he had been completely wrong all along. Obviously, during these 4 years of being together day and night, he had long been unable to live without her, but he refused to admit it. He had to lose her completely to realize his regret. In the car, he slammed the steering wheel hard. Then, like a madman, he threw out all the decorations that Harriet had left in the car. These were all things that Catherine didn't like, and he had to clean them up. Whether it was the dolls in the car, the cushions, or the snacks he had specially bought, he threw them out regardless. But no matter how he looked at it, there were no more memories of him and Catherine in this car. Obviously, they had been intimate in the car so many times, but he couldn't find a single trace of her. At this moment, Brian finally understood what it meant to feel a pain in his heart like being cut by a knife. He couldn't stand it anymore. He smashed his car until it was unrecognizable, venting his inner anger. Then he drove another car back to the villa. Even here, it was the same. Everything had been changed to the style that Harriet liked. She had only been back for a short month, and she had actually overshadowed Catherine's 4-year presence. Brian's eyes were red. Standing in the villa, he felt out of breath. Those glaring pink colors were like knives cutting at his heart one by one. He desperately searched for the things that Catherine had left behind. Even a hair tie would be fine. But there was nothing. His helplessness reached its peak, and he could only smash all the things inside as a way of venting. He didn't dare to rest. Once he closed his eyes, Catherine would appear in his mind. That day, he had clearly seen her packing her things, but he hadn't stopped her. He had watched her take everything away and leave nothing behind. Oh, he let out a painful roar, wishing he could go back in time and ask himself why he hadn't done anything when he clearly felt reluctant in his heart. He sat in the villa all night, trying to hold on to the last bit of warmth that belonged to Catherine. When it was dawn, his assistant came. "Mr. Brian, it's time to go to the company. Miss Harriet is still waiting for you," he reminded him euphemistically. Brian raised his red eyes, and all that was left in his heart was hatred. If it weren't for Harriet, how could Catherine have left him? It was all Harriet's fault. "Drive. Go to the company," he spoke, his voice so hoarse that it was almost unrecognizable. When he arrived at the company, it was exactly the time to go to work. Employees were coming and going, and they all cast emotional glances in a certain direction of the office. Harriet was disheveled. She hadn't slept all night and had been kneeling on the ground, pressed down firmly by the bodyguards. She could no longer hold on and was on the verge of fainting. But what she couldn't stand the most was the gazes of the people coming and going. She had been so glorious before, but now she was so humiliated in public. Harriet hated Catherine so much that she wanted to kill her. She shouted in a breakdown, "Catherine, you slut, it's all your fault. Otherwise, Brian wouldn't treat me like this. Why don't you just die? It would be better if you were dead. How dare you seduce Brian? You're just a slut." She kept screaming, and everyone heard her curses. But things were different now. Once she lost her power, her behavior attracted the disgust of others. Some colleagues who were on good terms with Catherine retorted Harriet one after another. "How can you say that about Secretary Catherine? She worked hard for 4 years and never did anything wrong. It's you who bullied her as soon as you came." "That's right. Catherine didn't do anything wrong. Miss Harriet, you've gone too far. Now that Catherine has left, you still won't let her go. You've been provoking Secretary Catherine all along. Now you're blaming others. I think you're the real slut." There were whispers around, pointing fingers at her as if she were a madwoman. Harriet was almost furious. She wanted to slap each of these people, but because she was held down by the bodyguards, she could only kneel on the ground and scream, "You're all sluts. What benefits did Catherine give you that you're all on her side? Did she sell herself to you?" She was going crazy and blurted out all kinds of words, making the others frown. At this moment, Brian, who had rushed over, happened to hear these words, and his face became even colder. His original intention was to make Harriet kneel here to realize her mistake. He didn't expect that she would still be so stubborn and blame all the mistakes on Catherine. He walked over quickly. When the employees in the company saw the boss coming, they consciously made way. Even the bodyguards let go of their hands. Freed. Harriet ignored everything and directly crawled to Brian's feet, hugging the man's leg and crying with a resentful expression. "Brian, help me. Look at these people. They're all Catherine's lackeys. I've been bullied. Brian, fire them all. Fire them all. As she spoke, she turned her head and pointed her finger viciously, aiming at the people who had just retorted against her. She, and him. They're all bitches. Harriet was extremely angry. The employees who were pointed at lowered their heads and didn't dare to speak. However, Brian didn't help her vent her anger as Harriet had expected. Instead, he kicked her away. I asked you to reflect, and this is how you do it. Harriet, you're nothing now, and you still dare to slander others. I've never realized that you have such a vicious mind. I heard everything they said just now. They were right, and Catherine didn't do anything wrong either. It's all you. It's you who forced her to leave. Harriet fell to the ground, tears in her eyes. You're supposed to love me. Brian, you love me. Brian looked down at her coldly. I love Catherine. He said this unexpected sentence, which surprised some people and shocked others. But Brian felt good. He had finally said this sentence that he had been holding back for 4 years. He raised the corner of his mouth, ignoring Harriet's collapsed expression. He repeated it. I love Catherine. As for you, my feelings for you are long gone. This period of time was just a mistake. I will find Catherine and be with her. Harriet, you can leave. The woman's pupils dilated, filled with disbelief. When she finally got this answer, she laughed and cried at the same time. You want me to leave? Brian, I'm telling you, I didn't force Catherine to leave. It was you. Do you think I don't know what you've done? You slept with her for 4 years and never gave her a proper status. As soon as I came back, you came crawling back. It was you who really forced her to leave. The relationship between him and Catherine had never been exposed in the company. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was shocked. Brian's face, which had just softened, darkened again. Harriet, who had been abandoned, didn't care about that. She decided to go all out and revealed everything she knew, laughing sarcastically. Do you know what I found in your car? Catherine's stockings. You must have done it in the car many times before. Catherine is such a fool. For 4 years, she was willing to be your mistress. Brian, it was you who didn't believe her words. It was you who saw her being tortured but still chose me. Do you think I forced Catherine to leave? It was you. With every word she said, Brian's face grew darker, and his fists clenched tighter. It seems you still haven't realized your mistake. As he spoke, he directed the bodyguards to hold Harriet down again and dragged her away, leaving behind only the woman's screams. Back at the villa, Brian ordered the bodyguards to lock her in the basement and forced her to repeat all the things she had slandered Catherine for. But this time, she was the one who suffered. She was forced to carry a scalding bowl, and her hands were burned red with blisters, or she was made to kneel as punishment, and she had to kneel for a whole day. Even if she fainted and woke up, she had to continue kneeling. During this period, Brian didn't go to see her once. He had more important things to do. Since he had recognized his true feelings, he had sworn to win Catherine back. He went to Dorothy's house in the country and knocked on the door. His sister quickly ran to open the door, but she seemed not to expect it to be him. The smile on her face froze and turned into a look of disgust. What are you doing here? Brian knew he was in the wrong. He was holding a lot of gifts in his hands and smiled at Dorothy. I haven't had the chance to visit since you came back. These are all for you. Dorothy. Dorothy didn't want to accept his favor, but Catherine was right. Anyway, they were siblings with a blood relationship. She coldly let Brian into the house and saw through his disguise. You're here to ask for Catherine's news. Right. I said I won't tell you. Just give up on that idea. Brian entered the house, put down the gifts, and said in a low voice, Dorothy, I know I was wrong. I want to make up for it. Please tell me where Catherine has gone. Okay. I won't let Harriet hurt her anymore. I will be with her properly in the future. Aren't you and she best friends? If Catherine and I are together in the future, you can see her every day. Dorothy quickly interrupted him. Even without you, Catherine and I are still best friends. As long as she's happy, I don't care where she is. Brother, you hurt her so many times. Do you still think you can win her back? It was you who told me that Harriet was my sister-in-law before. The man's words caught in his throat, and he didn't speak. But Dorothy was originally a straightforward person. Just thinking about the grievances Catherine had suffered made her angry. Seeing that Brian didn't say anything, she became even more sarcastic. For Harriet, you not only hit me but also Catherine. Brother, Don't you think it's too late to say you're wrong now? I'm telling you, Catherine is doing well abroad now. Hearing these words, Brian's body swayed. He took a deep breath and lowered his head in front of his sister. Sis, I know I was wrong. I have already punished Harriet. If you don't believe me, I can take you to see. Please tell Catherine that I know I was wrong. Catherine loved me so much. She loved me for 8 years. A full 8 years. She will definitely forgive me. Sis, please help me this time. I'm begging you. As he spoke, it got faster and faster, as if something was chasing him. His eyes were also red. But these words sounded ridiculous to Dorothy. She thought her brother was so ridiculous for the first time. You also know that she loved you for 8 years. Then how did you treat her? You treated her as a lover, a tool, a pet that you could call and dismiss at will. It was you who exhausted her love. Now that Catherine has left and you know you were wrong. Brother, she's also a person, and she can feel pain too. Hearing his sister's words, Brian felt even more regret in his heart. His voice was hoarse, his eyes were red, and he knelt down directly. Dorothy, at least let me see Catherine once. Just once. If she really doesn't forgive me, I will never bother her again. Since he was a child, Brian had never begged anyone. This was the first time he actually knelt down in front of someone. And it was his own sister. Just for Catherine, the person who had left him. Dorothy also didn't expect her proud brother to do such a thing. But she couldn't do something like betraying her good friend for her brother. Dorothy gritted her teeth in frustration. I can help you ask. If Catherine is willing to see you, I will tell you her current address. The person who had originally thought there was no hope suddenly lit up his eyes and nodded eagerly. Dorothy sent a message to Catherine, but there was a time difference of several hours between the country and abroad. Dorothy advised him to go back first and said she would notify him if there was any news. But Brian refused to leave. He stubbornly stayed at his sister's place and slept on the sofa. He woke up at the slightest sound, hoping it was news from Catherine. It was not until the next night that Dorothy received a reply. Okay, I'll meet him. Just a few words, but it brought hope to Brian. Catherine was still willing to see him. This meant there was still a possibility between them. With an excited mood, Brian couldn't wait to buy the nearest flight. Dorothy stopped him and frowned in disapproval. Brother, you should rest for a day before going. You haven't had a rest for several days, have you? Since Catherine said she would see you, she definitely won't break her promise. Brian shook off her hand. I can't wait any longer. During the time Catherine left me, I've been thinking about her day and night. I just want to see her now. His eyes and brows were gentle, which made Dorothy very confused. Looking at her brothers hurrying back, she couldn't help but sigh softly. If I had known it would be like this, why did it have to be in the first place? Brother. However, Brian didn't hear these words. All his thoughts were on Catherine. Just thinking about seeing her soon made his heart excited. When he got on the plane, he couldn't rest peacefully either. Had she been doing well abroad during this period? Had she lost weight? Did she lack money? In a foreign country, she must have been uncomfortable. Thinking of her, his heart softened, and all he could think of was Catherine's figure. At first, the girl's youthfulness, the secret love that she thought was perfect, was actually clear to him. But he had always been thinking about Harriet and thus ignored her. Even after that accidental and absurd night, he hadn't considered her. Who would have thought that the person who had always been so cautious suddenly confessed to him? He refused her, but he didn't refuse that young and energetic body. They were intimate in various places. Catherine was very sensible and wouldn't do things like other women for money or status. This was very good and in line with his wishes, which was why he had always tacitly allowed her to be by his side. If Harriet hadn't come back suddenly, he had even thought that it would be good to maintain such a relationship with Catherine. When did he fall in love with her? Was it when he saw her diligence, noticed her thoughtfulness, or felt her love? Brian couldn't tell. These 4 years had passed so quickly. Before he could react, he had already been captured by Catherine. But he had understood too late, which had made her leave. But it wouldn't be like that anymore. He had already thought it through. As long as Catherine could forgive him, he would do anything for her. He wouldn't let her be just a lover like before. Instead, he would publicly announce their relationship. He would marry her, love her for a lifetime, and use his whole life to make up for the hurt she had suffered during this period. Thinking of the life when Catherine came back to him, Brian couldn't help but smile. The feeling of happiness filled his chest. making him look forward to the moment of seeing her. After an 8-hour flight, the plane finally landed. Brian couldn't wait to rush to the agreed address to see the person he loved deeply. They had agreed to meet at a coffee shop. When Brian pushed the door open, the wind chime rang. He walked in and immediately saw Catherine sitting in the corner. It had been a month since they last saw each other, but it felt like a year of suffering. So now that he finally saw her, Brian felt a sense of trance. She had changed a lot when she was by his side. Because of her identity as a secretary, she most often wore work clothes, even after work. When they had some fun at home, Catherine had always given him the feeling of being serious. But now, she was wearing casual clothes, with her hair tied up, revealing her fair and slender neck. It made him feel as if he had gone back to the past, to the beginning when Catherine, who was green in love with him, was still there. He paused for a few seconds before walking over and greeting her with a smile. "Catherine, long time no see." He held back the urge to immediately hug her into his arms and greedily and fascinatedly stared at her face. "Yeah, let's get to the point. I'm willing to see you just to make things clear between us." Catherine didn't have the mood to reminisce. She took a sip of coffee and was just about to continue when Brian quickly took over. "I know what you mean. I was wrong before. I didn't recognize my true feelings, which allowed Harriet to hurt you. Catherine, I've just realized that I love you. The only person I truly love is you." He finished speaking in one breath, his eyes bright, looking forward to Catherine's response. In his imagination, since Catherine loved him so much, she would definitely forgive him and go back with him. But from beginning to end, the woman's expression didn't change. She pulled the corner of her mouth expressionlessly. "Brian, it's too late. Both your apology and your love. If you've finished speaking, then I'll leave. I don't think there's any need for us to talk." Brian's face changed. He instinctively grabbed the woman's hand, looking panicked. "It's not too late. Catherine, we still have a future. I've already punished Harriet. As long as you come back, I can give you anything. It's been 4 years. Just because of this 1 month. Don't you love me anymore? I know you're still angry. You can hit me or scold me if you want. Catherine, I'm begging you. Come back." "Okay." Catherine shook off his hand and replied indifferently. "That's right. Just because of this 1 month. I've seen you clearly. I don't love you anymore, Brian, and I won't go back. I wish you and Harriet a long and happy life together." As she spoke, she got up and was about to leave. Brian completely didn't expect her to react like this. In his heart, Catherine had always loved him deeply. How could she suddenly not love him anymore? A never-before-felt panic washed over him. When he learned that Catherine had left, he comforted himself that she still loved him. But now that he really saw her, she actually said she didn't love him anymore. At this moment, Brian felt as if his heart was being cut by a knife. He tightly grasped Catherine's hand and refused to let go. His always proud body was also trembling. He lowered his stance, and there was even a pitiful sobbing tone in his voice. "Catherine, don't treat me like this. I really know I was wrong. As long as you're willing to forgive me, we'll go back and get married right away. I won't let you be without a proper status anymore in the company. If you want to continue being a secretary, you can. If not, you can stay at home and be a wealthy lady. I'll earn money for you. In the future, everything I have will be yours. No matter who else appears, I won't hurt you. Catherine, please forgive me this time. We've been together for so long. You can't abandon me just because I made one mistake." Catherine, if it had been before, Catherine would have been very happy to hear such words. This was the man she had loved for a full 8 years, and they were finally going to have a happy ending. But now, because of Harriet, her heart was already dead. The feelings of those 8 years no longer existed. Those past experiences only made her hate herself for being blind and wasting so much time on Brian. She took a deep breath and firmly pried Brian's hand away. "Brian, I've made it very clear. We have no future. Isn't what I'm doing now exactly what you wanted? At the beginning, I said that as long as the person you loved came back, I would leave on my own. When Harriet came back, I also hoped that you might have developed feelings for me and would let go of Harriet for my sake. But it turns out that I was wrong." Looking at her expression, Brian had a feeling that he was about to lose her. He kept shaking his head and cried in front of others for the first time. He almost begged to pull her back. "Catherine, I really was wrong. Give me a chance to make up for it." Catherine. But Catherine didn't look back. She just left and disappeared from his sight. He just sat there in a daze in the coffee shop until it closed. He didn't know what to do. His heart was filled with pain. The more he felt this way, the more clearly he realized how important Catherine was to him. He had actually lost her like this. If Harriet hadn't come back, if he had realized earlier that he was in love with Catherine, if he hadn't disappointed Catherine, countless possibilities flashed through his mind, but he had no way to turn back. He wandered aimlessly on the streets abroad. A bolt of lightning struck, and then it started to rain heavily. Everyone on the road ran home to take shelter from the rain. But Brian didn't know where to go. He walked in the rain, chanting Catherine's name, and was completely soaked. Suddenly, his phone rang. He picked it up with anticipation. It was a message from Dorothy. "Brother, come back." Looking at these words, he suddenly felt very powerless. Why had he and Catherine ended up like this? He knelt down in the pouring rain and cried and shouted. The sound of the rain drowned out all other sounds, including his painful feelings. He stumbled to the front of an apartment. The door was tightly closed. He didn't dare to knock on the door and just curled up at the door. This was Catherine's residence, and only here did he feel a little comfort in his heart. He hadn't slept for several days. At this moment, in the rain and lying at the door, he actually fell into a drowsy sleep. In his dream, Catherine forgave him and went back to the country with him. They were just like before, but the difference was that in the dream, he didn't let Catherine down again. He immediately announced their relationship and even proposed to her. Catherine threw herself into his arms with tears in her eyes and said that she had finally waited for this day. Brian smiled slightly, as if he had grasped his own happiness. Then, he fainted in the heavy rain. When he opened his eyes again, he felt a sharp pain in his head and his body was difficult to move. He opened his eyes with great effort and saw a strange ceiling. He wanted to get out of bed. And the next moment, a gentle voice came. "Don't move." It was Catherine. Hearing this voice, Brian didn't care about anything else. He suddenly sat up and hugged the person by the bed tightly in his arms, as if he had regained something precious. "Catherine, have you forgiven me? I know I was wrong. I'll spend my whole life making up for you. Catherine, you have to believe me. I really was wrong. I can't live without you. He spoke while crying. The feeling of regret welled up in his heart, making his heart full of bitterness. He held the person in his arms tightly and didn't want to let go. "Brian, stop. I'm only doing this for Dorothy's sake. If you die at my door, Dorothy will be very sad." She frowned and broke free from that embrace. At this time, Brian had the chance to take a good look at her face. There was not a trace of affection in her eyes, only disgust. This expression hurt his heart. His face turned pale, and his hands were still in mid-air. He didn't know what to do. He just stared blankly at Catherine, as if looking at the person he loved the most but couldn't have. Sadness filled his whole body. He called her name in a hoarse voice. "Catherine." Catherine didn't respond, and her eyes were cold. "I've already called Dorothy. She'll come to pick you up. Brian, don't come to find me again. I'm doing well here without you. Catherine, let the past be the past. From the moment you chose Harriet, it was all over between us. Catherine." The man's voice became more and more painful with each word. He looked deeply at the person in front of him. She was clearly so close, but he felt that she was so far away from him. So far that he could never reach her again. "Is there really no chance for us?" He looked at her with the last bit of hope. Catherine finally looked at him directly and replied word by word. "Yes. There's no chance for us anymore." It was like being pierced by 1,000 arrows. Brian's heart ached so much that he felt like he was dying. He wanted to reach out and touch her face, but even this small wish was mercilessly avoided by Catherine. Brian's eyes were red, and tears fell. Okay, he said, his heart aching unbearably. It wasn't long before Dorothy came. As soon as she received Catherine's call, she rushed over immediately. The two hadn't seen each other for a month. As soon as Dorothy arrived, she threw herself into her best friend's arms. Catherine's expression softened, and she caught her. "Dorothy, you're here." They sat together and talked for a while. When it was time to part, Dorothy couldn't help but feel guilty. "I'm sorry, Catherine. I shouldn't have been soft-hearted and let my brother come to find you. I've caused you so much trouble." Catherine pinched her face. "It doesn't matter. Even if you didn't tell him, Brian would have found a way on his own. It's better to end the pain quickly. It's good to get everything out in the open this time. Even so, Dorothy still felt very guilty. She herself didn't expect her brother to be so crazy that he would stay in the rain all night without caring about his life. She turned her head to look at the person not far away who was looking at them with longing and restraint, and couldn't help but ask the question whose answer she really wanted to know. Catherine, if Harriet hadn't appeared, would you have been with my brother? Brian also really wanted to know the answer to this question. If Harriet hadn't appeared, would Catherine have been with him? The person involved smiled faintly. She had also thought about this question before, but after experiencing that 1 month, she already knew that even if there hadn't been Harriet, someone else would have appeared. Brian's love for her was just a product of regret after losing her. She stroked the bangs beside her ear and smiled with relief. No one asked her why, and maybe they all already had the answer. Dorothy took the disheartened Brian back to the country. Carter family's business had suffered serious losses during this period. Brian didn't have the heart to manage it anymore, so he had to temporarily hand it over to Dorothy. Poor her. Just after returning to the country, she had to clean up her brother's mess. But fortunately, she had studied business management abroad, so she wasn't completely ignorant. But when she was going to take over the company, Dorothy still kindly gave her brother some photos. When you were abroad, I also found out something. Take a look. Brian opened them and found that they were about Harriet. Dorothy had found out that during the years she was abroad, she hadn't studied seriously. Instead, she had been flirting around and had relationships with several foreigners. She had even had abortions several times. She was no longer the person Brian remembered. Come to think of it, what was she like before? Brian was slightly stunned and found that he couldn't remember what she looked like at the beginning. After 10 years of separation and reunion, that feeling of first love had long been worn away. Now, whenever he closed his eyes, only Catherine's face appeared in his mind, whether she was smiling or sad, vividly tugging at his heart. But after the next 10 years passed, could he really forget Catherine just like he had forgotten Harriet? There was a bit of hesitation and sadness in his heart, but the one responsible for all this was himself. He had clearly known what Harriet had done, but because of that vague feeling and the so-called love he kept talking about, for such a person, he had actually pushed Catherine away from him. Looking at those photos again, he felt no emotional fluctuations in his heart, as if his heart had died along with it. Thank you, Dorothy. I won't make you worry for too long. He thanked her in a hoarse voice. Suddenly, he thought of something and smiled at his sister. I almost forgot. I still owe you something. As he said that, he raised his hand and slapped himself hard in the face. With a heavy thud, that face immediately swelled up, scaring Dorothy. Brother, what are you doing? Brian swallowed the sweet taste of blood in his throat. I'm sorry for hitting you before. Sis, this is to pay you back. Dorothy frowned again, not knowing what to say. She raised her hand several times but then put it down. Finally, she let out a sigh. Forget it. As long as you don't act stupid again in the future. Maybe there will be another Catherine. You can't miss her then. Dorothy smiled and waved her hand. Brian didn't say anything and watched his sister leave. He didn't want to spoil his sister's mood because everyone knew that there wouldn't be another Catherine. The sour feeling in his heart welled up again, but he silently swallowed it. Brian picked up the photos in his hand and walked towards the basement. During this period, Harriet had been tortured terribly. She couldn't eat or sleep well. Everything she had done to Catherine had been returned to her 1,000-fold. She was shivering in the basement when she saw the door open and the light shining in. She didn't realize what was happening at first. It wasn't until Brian walked in that she came to her senses. She crawled over and hugged him like a drowning person grabbing at a straw. Brian, I was wrong. Forgive me. I'll never bother you and Catherine again. I'll go far away in the future and never get in your way again. Please let me go. I really know I was wrong. The woman pleaded and cried uncontrollably, looking extremely pitiful. Brian didn't say anything. He carefully examined that face. It had lost its purity and beauty, leaving only endless desire and greed. Why on earth had he lost the most important person because of her? Just thinking of this made Brian angry. He wished he could tear Harriet to pieces. But Dorothy and Catherine were right. Fundamentally, it was because he had been blinded for a moment. All Harriet had done was take advantage of his power. He calmed down a bit and threw those photos down. When Harriet saw the contents, her eyes widened in surprise, and her pupils suddenly shrank. Those things were the past she most wanted to bury. She had returned to the country because she couldn't make it abroad anymore. But she didn't expect it to be dug up. She was flustered and at a loss. No, no, no. This isn't me. Brian, you have to believe me. This isn't me in these photos. They must have been photoshopped. Someone is trying to frame me. It's Catherine, isn't it? She doesn't want you to let me go. So she made these things to make you angry. She hugged her head and continued to talk wildly, as if she had gone crazy. I wasn't like this abroad at all. I went to a top university. I had a good job and a boyfriend who loved me. None of these things happened. These are all fake. This isn't supposed to be my life. As she spoke, she burst into tears. At first, when she went abroad, she had indeed lived a carefree life. Because of her good looks, she had several romantic partners who were willing to spend money on her. Even if she did something wrong, someone would smooth things over for her. But as time passed, she didn't know when it started. The people around her started leaving one by one. She didn't get her graduation certificate and could only buy a certificate from a third-rate school. She also encountered difficulties everywhere when looking for a job and couldn't support herself at all. As a last resort, she had to sell her body to win the favor of others. But soon, her reputation spread abroad, and she lost her place there. So she had to return to the country. At first, she was glad that there was still Brian in the country, waiting for her foolishly. But now, she realized that her life hadn't changed. Everything came at a price. She knelt down and sobbed, apologizing and kowtowing. Brian didn't show much expression throughout. He just looked at her. It wasn't until Harriet ran out of strength that he spoke. You can go. This unexpected answer made the woman widen her eyes in surprise and murmur in disbelief. What? Brian, what did you say? Brian repeated it according to her request. You can go. Harriet, from now on, we have nothing to do with each other. I did love you once, but it's been too long. Now, there's someone else in my heart. Hearing this sentence, she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Or rather, she didn't even know where she could go. Brian left and didn't care about Harriet anymore. The door remained open, and there were no more bodyguards to force or torture her. But she suddenly felt that the unknown future ahead was even scarier than her current situation. After a long time, Harriet slowly stood up and stumbled out. She left the Carter family. No one knew where she had gone, and no one cared about her choice. After Brian had rested well, he took over the company again. Dorothy heaved a sigh of relief. Her childhood aspiration had never been to manage the family business. She had her own dreams and plans. A year later, Dorothy received a text message from Catherine. Her good friend was getting married and had invited her to be a bridesmaid. Dorothy was overjoyed. She dropped everything she was doing and immediately bought a ticket, preparing to fly over. Naturally, Brian also learned of this news from his sister. His hand paused for a moment, and then he lowered his eyes, pretending not to care as he asked, "Is she getting married so soon?" Over the past year, he had often learned about Catherine's recent situation from his sister. He also knew that she had a boyfriend who loved her very much. But now she was actually getting married. He couldn't quite describe the feeling in his heart. Brian only felt that his vision became blurred, and he couldn't see the words he was writing clearly. He heard a gentle voice coming from the other end of Dorothy's speakerphone. "Yes, it's time to get married. It's not easy to meet the right person, and I don't want to wait any longer." It was Catherine. Her voice was soft but filled with a smile. Just by listening, one could tell that she was very happy. Dorothy was packing her things while talking to her on the phone. "That's true. But are you guys going to settle abroad and not come back? You're making me run back and forth. You heartless girl didn't even come to see me." She scolded with a smile and quickly finished packing her suitcase. Then she turned around and waved at Brian. "I'm leaving, brother." Brian didn't say anything. It wasn't until Dorothy had walked far away, her back was no longer visible, and he could no longer hear the voice on the phone that he slowly put down the pen he had been using to approve documents and placed his palm against his forehead. Tears welled up and fell. His heart ached so much that he could barely breathe. So this was what it felt like to watch the woman he loved deeply marry someone else. He had truly lost Catherine. He trembled, unable to stop his painful tears, and wept bitterly in suppression. Another year passed, and Dorothy got married too. Catherine returned to the country and, as promised, served as her bridesmaid. He hadn't seen her for a long time. Brian controlled his emotions. At the wedding, he placed his sister's hand in her husband's. Then, his gaze uncontrollably settled on Catherine. Her bridesmaid dress was simple and beautiful, making his breath catch. He was afraid of disturbing this dream. After the wedding, Brian accompanied his sister to offer toasts. They came to Catherine's table. "Catherine, long time no see." Dorothy smiled. Brian nodded calmly. "Long time no see, Catherine." He reached out his hand, and their wine glasses gently clinked together. The clear sound echoed in his excited heart. He wanted to say so many things. Like, "You've changed a lot. How are you doing? Are you happy? You." All those impulses stopped at the moment a man walked up. That was her husband. The man put his arm around Catherine's waist and took the glass of wine for her. It wasn't until an unexpected incident occurred, and Brian was drugged. Catherine's face turned slightly red, while Dorothy was extremely surprised. "You're actually pregnant. Catherine, why didn't you tell me? Don't you love me anymore?" Catherine quickly explained, with a hint of bashful shyness. "It's only been a month. I wanted to wait for a while until it was more stable before telling you. It's still too early now." Dorothy didn't agree with this. She immediately reserved the position of godmother. She gently and joyfully stroked Catherine's flat belly. Her husband's eyes were filled with tenderness and doting, and Catherine had a look of helpless happiness. The three of them were gathered together, while Brian felt like an outsider. It turned out that the best way to end things was to become strangers. He stared blankly at Catherine's happy face and gentle movements. Seeing her snuggle closely with her husband, his heart ached dully. He raised his wine glass and murmured to her, "Congratulations. You've finally found your own happiness." After saying that, he drained the glass in one gulp. For the first time, he realized that the wine was so pungent. He left silently, no longer disturbing them. A gust of wind blew. Catherine looked up and realized that there was no one in that position anymore. She was slightly dazed for a moment and then shook her head. Now, the most important people to her were already by her side.